was very funny. And action. From Los Angeles, I'm Brad Lemack, and thank you for being with us for this edition of Inside the Business of Acting. This, of course, and pay attention because this will be on your final, is the series where we have the most amazing, successful working actors and other industry professionals talking about their career journeys, their turning points, and lessons learned along the way, all to empower you on your journey in the business of acting. And there is no better turning point in a career journey than getting your own television series. And we will talk about that and many, many, many other things with the fabulous, wonderful, amazingly nice Bonnie Franklin.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi, Brad.
Thank you for doing this.
It's my pleasure.
This is really nice. And as if I didn't really adore you enough going in, the fact that you wore something that matches the
your
cover
book on purpose,
of the business,
of course.
right?
You know, just even the skirt.
No, it's really true. And so if you do the book and you do your mug and we have the branding and the color, I mean, it's like...
I did it on purpose.
No, seriously, I thank you
Seriously, you're welcome.
very much for that.
What?
Great turning point to get to be the star of your own TV series. So,
Yes.
so how did you get that job? One day at a time. One day at a time. I'm talking like,
Yeah.
Yes,
well,
one day at a time.
I was working in New York. I moved to New York. I was born out in California. Actually, I was a Santa Monica.
And went to Beverly Hills High, which
I did go to Beverly
we
Hills
will
High
talk
School.
about.
I did. And then after I got married the first time, I did a show in New York. I did Your Own Thing, which I had originated in San Francisco. Didn't originate the show, but the San Francisco company. That took me back to New York, and I did that in New York, and that's where I wanted to be. I never wanted to be anyplace else. I wanted to work in theater, musical theater, and everything else in New York. I loved it. I fell in love with the city. That's where I wanted to be.
So you weren't pursuing necessarily
Never.
a television career?
No. I did television, as I was growing up, things like Gidget and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I found my love and where I wanted to be. Never wanted to leave New York. Loved it. And I did a summer stock season, and in that season, this has nothing to do with my career. Well, it does actually.
It all does.
Does actually.
Yeah.
I got that summer stock season because when I was in college, I did a musical in college, and the musical director said they wanted me to. Anyway. So
And this was Smith?
This was at Smith, but I did the show at
Right.
Amherst. Okay.
Right.
So then I was in Beverly, Massachusetts, doing this thing.
North Shore
and
Music Theater.
I did North Shore Music, which
Circus.
just closed
Yes,
down.
yes, because that's my old hanging.
That's right, Boston.
Right.
It just closed down, and it was very sad because I was on a trip last year with some people from Boston, and they said they always went year after year, and they remembered me from 40 years ago, however many. It's probably that long. So at any rate, I had an affair with a guy who worked on the crew there, and I came out to visit him. He taught in Arizona, so I came out to sleep with him, and since
And
I
his
was
name
that
is,
far right now,
right.
people have come up to me and said, "I don't
Right.
remember where you went." Okay, so then since I was that far west, my folks still lived in L.A., and I thought, well, I'll go visit them in L.A. And there was only two companies that I wanted to work with in television if I was going to do television, and that was MTM and Norman Lear.
And the year is 1970.
The year is 1974.
Right.
Something like that.
And Norman was enjoying
Norman,
tremendous success with All in the Family. And
Maude
of course,
already,
Maude
and I think already by that time, Brad, it was probably Good Times. I don't know if the Jeffersons had started. They might have.
Yeah,
but it was
yes,
all
that
about
era,
that.
yeah.
All about that. So I did meet with the MTM people. They could have cared less. And then I met Norman, and it was just love. It was just love. Now, I thought I was going to meet him because I knew he was doing Hot L Baltimore, and so I came in, a little Hot L Baltimore outfit with low-rise jeans and a little shirt, kind of. So he said,
and
Norman is, with his little hat, and he had a mustache at the time, and he said, okay, so don't do anything without checking with me because you're going to do a series with me. I mean, it was just like that.
Really?
As I met him that day,
Wow.
and I met Alan Mannings, who created the show, which was based on his life, Whitney Blake, and blah, blah, blah. Right. And I met him. He told me what the story was, and that was it. And that's how it happened. And he had seen me in Applause, I think, and he had seen but it just was something that Norman, you know, as you know, Norman always looked for wet faces. Do you know from Wet Faces? Okay.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if your audience does, but the
Explain,
a wet
Lucy.
face, okay,
Yes.
as opposed to an Aaron Spelling actor
Yeah.
who is, you know, quite beautiful and probably hides a bit of what a wet face is something that you just know what you're thinking, you know what's there, it's all out there. If you're happy, if you're sad, if you're whatever,
This will be
it's
on the
your-
final
it's,
also.
It's on your face.
Yeah.
And I know I have a wet face, but I had never heard that before in my life, what that was. So that was it. And the next thing I heard from, I went back and did theater. As a matter of fact, when I got called, I was doing Oh Coward in Cincinnati, I think. And he called and he said that Mackenzie Phillips was going to play my daughter. I said, no, that'll never work. She's too old and too tall. And and then we met, and we both had big mouths and a lot of teeth. And that was it. We made a first pilot, which they totally changed. And then we did our second pilot, which had the cast that
We saw.
you saw.
So I need to deconstruct a little bit.
Go ahead.
Because it
Go ahead. Hey,
sounds.
this is your show.
That will also be on your final.
Almost a spit take.
Right, sorry.
All right.
Speaking of wet
Right.
face, so two things I wanted to say. One is Norman Lear was known for pulling people from theater. Chase
Yeah.
Sherman Hemsley around
Right.
for
Right.
ever trying to find him for the Jeffersons. But I want to back up on that part of the journey. So I met with Norman Lear. Like, what is that? How did that happen?
Well, I had an agent.
Okay.
I had an agent out here.
And in New York, had you been represented in New York?
I was represented in New York. It all began, actually, before agents, although I did have an agent earlier. I got a manager, and this wonderful woman, may she rest in peace,
Marilyn Shapiro.
Marilyn Shapiro, introduced me to these agents. And so the one out in California was magnificent. He was the best agent in the world. He's since gone, but Ray Sackheim was just a great, great agent. And so I called him, or Marilyn called him, whatever it was, and he set up those appointments. See, in those days, it's very different from the way it is now. I think it is so hard now. It is just very different. The casting agents now have a great deal of power. In those days, he could call Norman Lear and call, Ed Weinberger and say, I've got this gal who I think is great. See her. That would never happen.
No,
today.
the landscape
never,
is so.
It's just very different. It would never happen. So I went into CBS and Fairfax CBS, and I went down the hall, and I went into his office, and that was it. We sat down just as we're sitting down now, with a cup of coffee, and he had a mustache cup. I remember because it was.
What's a mustache cup?
Well, it was a thing so that your mustache didn't get wet as you were.
I don't know.
drinking.
I've never seen that. So what does it have? Is it a protective?
It has a thing, yeah.
Really?
So
This will also be on the.
yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, I never heard
that.
that.
I remember it. Yeah. But I'm sure I commented on it, and then we just sat and talked, and that was it.
You liked him right away?
I loved him, and there was just a connection. There was just a connection. And I still love him to this day. He's an incredibly human being, as well as being brilliant in what he did. I mean, just brilliant in what he did. And I think one of the things that was so, there were many things that I found very powerful about him. One is he had an incredible instinct for casting. He really did. He was really quite remarkable that way. And there are many instances I have of that during the course of our show. But he also had respect for the actor if the actor showed that they were up to it. And as you know, he did the readings the first day, table read, and I have never seen it since then ever the way he did it, because not only were all the writers and the producers and the actors and whatever, and we didn't have that kind of interference because it was Norman from the network as you do now, but network people were there as well. But he respected the actors' minds if they were able to come up with it and say, well, this doesn't work because, what if, even though everybody might be laughing, he really respected that. So.
He had really created a sense of community. Created a community. It wasn't just a sense.
He did. He created a community. And I'm always unhappy that all of those years that we were all of those shows were at KTTV and we were all running into each other and interacting. And I always had a thing that I wanted to do it and demand that we do it, that we do one of those MGM photos with all of those things, and it never happened, and we never did it, and I never, People Magazine was like the closest to that, but it wasn't the same.
And that was, I'm trying to remember, that was like 10, 15, 18 years ago. It was some significant year for Norman and all the stars.
Oh, you mean the People Magazine
thing? And that was a great day. Yeah. He changed the face of television comedy, changed the face of American entertainment, and of course, the DVDs have just come out celebrating, which of course
you
are the Norman Lear collection, which is an amazing tribute to.
It is great, and it's lovely. It's beautifully packaged, and I just got it, and it has 6 of his shows, the first season of it,
including One Day at a Time.
Including One Day.
How many years? 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a significant part of the journey, and we will continue to talk about this in our upcoming segments that we have. But just sort of quick question before we have to. I'm sorry, we have to go, but we'll be back. Did you have a sense as an actor that something significant along the journey was about to happen at the time you got the series?
My journey or the series itself?
Yours.
I think that's. I realize, okay. The short answer is yes, but I began to realize it more and more when we started getting the response from the audience, from the world, and then I realized, because I went crying to Carol O'Connor saying, "What am I going to do?" Because our writing was very bad our first year. In that he said, "You have to take responsibility. Somebody has to take responsibility for the show." And he said, and I said, "But I'm not a man, and I'm not a writer. I'm used to. I'm not used to doing that." And he said, "You have to."
And it's the late 1970s. So
and it was mid-1970s.
Mid-1970s.
Yeah, mid-1970s, and we were getting letters that said, "This is my life. This is, and taking it as if it were." So there was a certain responsibility to the audience to be truthful, to do a show that was about something, and to be funny.
And like Norman's other shows, you were trailblazer as the single parent
we were.
In the process.
We were.
We will return to talk about that.
Okay.
And also, you said something way earlier. I will see if you're paying attention. I just said, I was in Applause and blah, 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 blah. But in fact, Applause on Broadway was huge. And we will. That's a good cliffhanger. Right. So you won't want to miss episode 2. You'll be back. Right.
Okay.
You'll stay.
Right.
This is the wonderful Bonnie Franklin, and we're talking about life inside the business of acting for her and her career journey, and there's lots of lessons to learn and talk about. So thank you for this so far. We will be back, and hope that you will join us. I'm Brad Lemack in Los Angeles, and we're going to keep the red thing going, and we'll see you in number 2.
I wish I would have known that I was so smart.
See?
Now I know.